Let me paint you the scene. 200 guests. A venue that costs $50,000. White flowers on every table. A 4-piece string quartet. An open bar. My wedding dress fits perfectly. My hair is done. The photographer has already taken 100 shots. Everything is ready. And instead of walking down the aisle toward the man I thought I was going to marry, I walked to the AV booth, handed the guy a USB drive, and watched my fiancé's credit report, his gambling accounts, his collection notices, and his $200,000 in hidden debt go up on the projector screen in front of every single person he had ever invited into his life. Then I called the caterer, told them to pack up and leave. That meant the $50,000 venue bill stayed in his name. Then I walked out in my wedding dress. Here's the thing he never accounted for when he handed me that prenup 3 weeks before the wedding. My dad has been a licensed private investigator for 22 years.
I'm Serena.
And this is the story of the best worst day of my life. Okay, so I've been asked to post this in full like 15 times in the past week and I keep putting it off because honestly it's a lot to relive, but here it is. All of it. My ex-fiancé, I'll call him Kyle, is 31. We dated for 2 years. I thought I knew him. Spoiler. I absolutely did not. Some context you need. My family is comfortable. Not like private jet wealthy, but my parents have done well. Dad built a successful security consulting firm. Mom is a real estate developer. I work in finance myself. Money isn't something I'm naive about, but I'll be honest. When you love someone, you don't always think about them the way you'd think about a line item on a balance sheet. That's the gap Kyle exploited. He was charming. He was attentive. He had a good job or what looked like a good job. He talked about the future in a way that felt real and thought through. When he proposed, I said yes without a single hesitation. That was before the prenup. 3 weeks before the wedding, when everything was booked, paid, and completely locked in, Kyle sat me down and said he wanted to talk about a prenuptial agreement. He framed it as mutual protection. Said he'd been talking to a financial advisor who thought it was smart for both of them. Said it was just a formality since we both had assets. Said he'd already had his attorney draw it up and it was very standard. The word standard did a lot of heavy lifting in that conversation. Something about the timing bothered me. Not in a dramatic alarm bells way. More like a quiet itch I couldn't place. Why now 3 weeks out? Why already drafted? Why had this never come up in 2 years of talking about our future? I took the document. I told him I'd read it over. What I actually did was take it to my dad. My dad, I'll call him Warren, has been a licensed private investigator for 22 years. His entire professional life is built around the principle that what people show you is almost never the complete picture. He reads people and documents and financial patterns the way other people read the news. It's just how he's wired. He looked at the prenup for about 20 minutes. Then he set it down and looked at me. He said, "This isn't mutual protection, Serena. The liability shield clauses in here are written almost entirely in his favor, specifically around pre-existing financial obligations." I asked him what that meant. He said, "It means if he brought debt into this marriage that you didn't know about, this document would make it very difficult for you to disclaim responsibility for it once you signed." He asked if I knew anything about Kyle's financial history beyond what he'd volunteered. I said no. Dad said, "Give me 3 weeks." I said, "We get married in 3 weeks." He said, "I know. Give me 3 weeks." I want to be real about what those 3 weeks felt like. I was still planning a wedding. I was still going to dress fittings and finalizing seating charts and doing all the things a bride does in the home stretch. And underneath all of it, I was waiting for my father to tell me that either I was being paranoid and Kyle was fine, or that I had been badly, deliberately deceived by the person I was about to legally bind my life to. I didn't tell Kyle the audit was happening. I kept everything normal on the surface. He kept pushing gently for me to sign the prenup. I kept saying I was still reviewing it with my own attorney, which was technically true. Dad called me at 7 a.m. on our wedding day. I was already in hair and makeup. My maid of honor was in the chair beside me. I stepped out into the hallway. Dad said, "I need to see you before you go to the venue." I knew from his voice. I'll give you the condensed version of what the audit found because the full picture is genuinely staggering and I'd be here all day. Kyle had approximately $200,000 in gambling-related debt spread across multiple accounts, some through legal channels like casino credit lines, some through less official arrangements that my dad described as the kind that don't send letters, they send people. He had opened 3 credit cards in the last 18 months without my knowledge. He had been paying minimum balances on all of them while the debt ballooned. His actual liquid assets were a fraction of what he'd implied to me over 2 years of conversations. The prenup, specifically those liability clauses my dad had flagged, was designed to make me responsible for the full picture of our joint finances upon signing, while simultaneously limiting my ability to contest premarital debt obligations in the event of a divorce. In plain English, if I signed that document and we married, I would have been on the hook for his $200,000 the moment I wrote my name on the line. He had been planning this. It wasn't impulsive. It was a strategy. I sat in my dad's car in my wedding dress and I cried for about 10 minutes. Not for him, I want to be clear about that. I cried because 2 years of my life had just become something different than what I thought they were. And that is a specific kind of grief that doesn't have a clean name. Then I dried my face. I pulled out my phone. And I asked my dad a question. I said, "The venue has a projector system for the slideshow we built, right?" He looked at me. I said, "Can you get everything onto a USB drive in the next 40 minutes? He smiled. "Just slightly. Just enough," he said. "I've been a PI for 22 years, sweetheart. I already have it on one." 200 guests were seated. The string quartet was playing. Kyle was at the altar. I could see him on the venue's internal monitor in the bridal suite, looking pleased, looking confident, looking like a man who had no idea what was about to happen to him. I walked into the venue from the side entrance. Not down the aisle. I walked straight to the AV booth in the back corner, where a very confused young technician was managing the equipment. I handed him the USB drive. I told him to put what was on it up on the main screen. He hesitated. I told him I was the bride and I was paying for this venue and he should put it on the screen right now, please. He put it on the screen. The slideshow we'd built together, the cute photos that our love story montage disappeared. And in its place, filling the entire projection wall at the front of a $50,000 venue, was Kyle's credit report. His account summaries. The collections notices. A simple, clearly labeled breakdown my father had prepared. $200,000 in concealed debt, detailed by source. I watched Kyle turn around and see it. I watched the guests turn around and see it. I watched his mother in the front row put her hand over her mouth. I gave it about 30 seconds. Let people read. Let it settle. Then I called the caterer on my cell phone, right there in the middle of the room, and told them the event was canceled and they should pack their equipment and leave. Which meant, per the catering contract, their deposit was forfeit, and more importantly, it meant the venue's catering-tied billing clause activated, shifting the full $50,000 balance from a shared account to the primary booking name, Kyle's name. I put my phone in my bouquet. I looked at the room, 200 people absolutely silent, staring at a credit report projected behind an altar, and I walked out. My dad was waiting at the car. He had already put my overnight bag in the trunk. He handed me a coffee. He said, "You okay?" I said, "Not yet, but I will be." He said, "Yeah, you will." Kyle has called 11 times. I haven't picked up. His attorney sent a message to mine about reputational damages from the projector screen. My attorney replied asking if Kyle would like to discuss the $200,000 in concealed debt and the fraudulent prenuptial agreement instead. We have not heard back. Several guests reached out. Most were kind. 2 were from Kyle's side and were not. I blocked them without replying. My maid of honor flew in for the weekend anyway, and we spent the night ordering room service in a hotel that was supposed to be our first night as a married couple. It was honestly one of the better nights I've had in recent memory. Some people in the comments are going to say the projector was too far. To those people, he tried to make me legally responsible for $200,000 he hid from me for 2 years. The projector was exactly far enough. Kyle stood at that altar looking like the man who had figured everything out. The prenup was ready. The wedding was happening. The girl with family money was about to sign her name to his debt and never even know it. He had thought of everything. Except her dad. 22 years as a licensed PI. 3 weeks. 1 USB drive. And a projector screen that made sure every single person in Kyle's life, every friend, every family member, every colleague he'd ever bragged to, saw exactly who he really was before she ever said I do. She didn't walk down the aisle. She walked to the AV booth. And he walked out of that venue with a $50,000 bill, a credit report that had been seen by 200 people, and no bride. So, jury, was putting that credit report on the projector screen the right call? Or did it go too far? And the question I really want you to answer. If you found out the person you loved had been hiding $200,000 in debt and tried to trap you into taking responsibility for it, what would your version of that projector screen look like? Drop your verdict in the comments. I want to read every single one. The floor is absolutely yours.